Rise of Hawk, Part 4, Scene 26. Barna stood at a round antique bathroom vanity. The mirror above it was square and had a beautiful dark metal frame, with mythological creatures dancing around the edges of it. He wiped his hands on a battered grey towel lying over the edge of the vanity and stared at his own face in the mirror. He looked terrible. His eyes were red, skin around them was mottled from lack of sleep, and his loose black hair fell around his face in messy, unwashed threads. He sighed and turned back towards the door. The RA members, at least those he could sense through the side shielding in the walls, were scattered all over. Most of them were downstairs, perhaps guarding the premises. Barna touched the ornate brass door handle, about to go back to Zack, but stopped. Those he could sense moved from their individual locations throughout the manor house. Their motion was all at once as if an alarm had been tripped. With his hand still resting on the doorknob, he waited to see where they were going. Some of them gathered in groups of 2 or 3 downstairs, likely guarding the doors, but about half of them started to converge on the main stairwell. Something was going on, and whatever it wasn't good. The stairwell was between where he was standing and Zack, so he couldn't get back to the boy without being seen. As a high-rated dodge talent, Zack could certainly look after himself for a little while, but a person could not easily dodge and fire a weapon simultaneously. Without the capacity to defend himself, it would only take one mistake and Zack would be killed. He had to get to the boy as soon as possible. Once together, they would plan on an escape route, or at least create a defensible position until the others came in to back them up. Unfortunately, there was no way to contact Asha and the others to come help them until he could get to a window or some gap in the side-suppressed external walls. Barna pulled out his primary weapon from the holster in the small of his back and opened the door a little. It was crunch time, and he hoped with all his might that the boy was as good as Asha claimed. Barna glanced down the hallway towards the stairwell. 3 men were heading in his direction. They did not look friendly. With the brush of a delicate telepathic hand, Barna sensed that 2 of them had mental shields. He grabbed the mind of the third and squeezed with all his might. The man roared in agony and dropped to his knees. Barna gripped his mind a little tighter. An agonized whimper came from the younger man, and then he flopped, face first, onto the marble floor. If he wasn't dead, he would be soon. The other 2 backed away from their companion, likely having never seen a telepathic attack of that strength before. Taking advantage of their surprise, Barna stepped out of the bathroom doorway, gun up, and with 1 shot each, killed them both. Scene break. Zack was asleep when he sensed the shafts of silver trajectory racing towards him. Bullets. Bullets were coming straight for him. His body tensed and rolled out of the way as he came out of a deep sleep. His instinct got him to his feet and demanded he skitter sideways. He did so, and gunfire became the first thing his fully conscious mind understood. Someone was shooting him, and to stay alive he had to let his instincts take over. Standing in the doorway, the old man, Mena, held a young auburn-haired Leela in his massive arms. The little girl should have woken up from all of the noise, so Zack could only assume she'd been telepathically forced unconscious. The old woman's words flitted through his mind, and he knew now exactly what she meant. If he chose to help the little girl, he and Barna would die. There were 4 people with guns, all aimed at him. Zack stared at them for a moment. They seemed uncertain. "Just kill him!" roared the old man. Zack moved even before they started firing again. He danced across the floor, dodging the lines of silver bullet trajectory. He had to choose to live. To do that, he had to let go of any doubt and fear, as well as any regrets. Just let his instinct dodge. He couldn't save the girl. All he could do was save himself. Zack would have laughed had he been watching the situation on a screen. A gunfight in a room like that. The walls were painted with a vibrant green forest of massive trees, forest animals, wraith creatures, and fey figures in the flight. Boxes of toys filled most of the central space, and a brightly painted playhouse sat in the far corner. The little girl, Leela, had loved that playhouse, probably because none of the adults could get in there with her. She had played peekaboo with them for most of the afternoon. A line of silver flared down near his foot. He lifted it up as the bullet that followed the trajectory blew through and knocked his sneaker off as it brushed past. He had to focus. He had to focus on staying alive. He couldn't think about the little girl, or his fear, or even his doubt. He had to simply focus on nothing and let his instinct guide his body, or he would be killed. The old man roared again over the gunfire, and Zack's feet flickered left and then quickly right. They were trying to trick him into dodging one way and into a second line of gunfire. They were smart terrorists, but he simply had to be faster, at least until Bana could get there to help him. He watched the old man turn out of the playroom with the little girl still in his arms. The door closed behind him. Scene 27. Staring down the barrel of his handgun, Bana made his way across the broad stone hall towards the stairwell entrance. He walked silently and within a bubble of no thought and no emotion, so that he was essentially invisible to those RA who were telepaths or empaths throughout the building. It wasn't much of an advantage, but it might help him survive that much longer in such an impossible situation. Gunfire sounded from the playroom, and he hoped that Zack could hold on. He had to cross the stairwell before he could get to the boy, but in a way the constant gunfire was a sign that Zack was dodging well. It was silence he'd have to worry about. The stairwell was an open area of the second floor. 2 stone staircases led up towards him and a balcony, which he looked down on the grungy parlour below and the front door. He stopped at the edge of cover to sense where the enemy was within the building. A handful of RA were in the corner of the house with Zack. All the rest seemed to be downstairs. But, nah? Taylor's mental voice was scattered and dim but recognisable. He reached for the wisps of his mind. Tay, send back up, now! We're coming. Hold. His mental voice faded and came back again mid-sentence. Front door. Someone was coming upstairs towards Bana. He let go of the wisp of Taylor's voice and stepped out into the view of the RA woman. He fired before she saw him, splattering her white shirt with blood as she fell back down the stairs. Bana sidestepped across the open balcony, watching for his next target. Gunfire continued to come through in a steady stream from the playroom, and, as he cleared the balcony, getting some cover from the wall, the playroom door opened. One figure held the child in his arms as a second lifted a weapon. Bana fired first, and the young man dropped to the ground like a rag doll. Bana stared down the barrel at Mena, who brought a gun from behind him up to the head of the little girl. Bana wasn't sure if he should shoot the man and risk killing a child, or wait to see what Mena would do. The old man watched him with calm, dark eyes. Bana sensed a personality who believed himself to be better than others, and he knew instinctively that this man would kill without remorse or pause. The girl in Mena's arms wasn't a child to him. She wasn't even sentient. A terrible attitude which made trying to save the girl difficult. Mena's black eyes seemed to shine mockingly at him. Look at us here, come to conflict. This is why you don't betray the Rona Aban. Bana frowned. We haven't betrayed you. Then where is my brother? With a knowing, cynical smile on his face, Mena walked towards him. Something about the old man made Bana's skin crawl, and he instinctively backed out of reach. But even as Bana moved away, he aimed his weapon. Give me the girl. No, not until I hear from my brother, said the old man, his dark eyes still mocking and arrogant. Your boy is good, but how much longer will he last before he makes a mistake? Bana regripped his weapon. This was the choice that the old woman had spoken about. Zack or the girl. Protect each other or die. He swallowed and dropped his weapon. Mena grinned at him and backed towards the stairs. Tell your leader, if my brother isn't returned to me in one piece, this little pup's life is forfeit. Scene break. The bullet grazed Zack's face as he arched his back to get out of the way. It carved a burning hot line across one cheekbone before embedding itself into a painted tree on the wall behind him. Zack was getting tired and the bullets were getting closer. He didn't have much time left. Pulling out of the black back bend, he flipped sideways and skidded far to the right. At least they were following a pattern of sorts. They'd chase him with bullets, then try and trick him, get frustrated, and then chase him with bullets again. A silver line cut through his left shoulder, and he barely managed to duck out of the way before the accompanying bullet arrived. His shirt ripped and another burning hot line of flying metal touched his skin. He cried out as the bullet ripped muscle and surface flesh as it went past. He stumbled, his shoeless foot tripping on the bedclothes on the floor. As he fell, Zack rolled sideways, hoping that he'd have enough momentum to get back onto his feet. A smaller-sounding weapon fired, and the silver shafts of potential trajectory disappeared from around him. But there wasn't time to process that, because he rolled hard into a wall. His forehead smacked into the painted surface, bringing with the impact a bunch of stars and a microsecond of darkness. He lay on the ground, stunned for a few seconds. Gunfire went off around him, but he wasn't hit by any bullets. Then all was quiet again. Zack coughed, blinking repeatedly as he cleared away the fog in his mind. A long, dark face came into his field of vision. "Zack, are you all right?" Bana's booming voice echoed in his head, and all Zack could do was stare. After a few seconds, he blinked and finally got his voice back to work. "I think so." "You're bleeding." "I'm all right." Putting one hand to the wound on his arm, Zack pushed against the nearby wall and got to his feet. His head spun, and he reached out for something stationary. Bana steadied him with one hand, and through their touch, Zack sensed that Bana, who'd been almost cold towards him since the man had joined the group, was genuinely concerned. He smiled. "I'm okay, just a little beat up. What do we do now?" "The others are coming. I think we need to get to the front door. Can you—" A deep nausea lifted out of Zack's spine into his stomach. He felt the colour drain out of his face. The world spun around him and he swayed on his feet. Bana grabbed him again. "I got you, kid." Zack knew he was fainting, but couldn't do a thing to stop it. Scene 28. Had the situation not been as serious, Lalande would have been grinning broadly as she set up the rush job explosives on Mena's front door. She never liked the way Mena behaved towards everyone else in the RA. He acted like some kind of lord looking down his nose at his subjects. However, in the old days, she tolerated it because there was no other choice. It was either be with the RA or be hunted down by the guard. But now she could bring that high-horse marmon down on Mena's head with one little homemade device. She put the explosive cocktail together from things she found in the hotel room and the cleaner's supply trolley on their first evening back in Rona. She hadn't done it because she expected to use it, but because she was bored with waiting around and doing nothing. It wasn't technically an explosive device, more like a destructive chemical reaction involving flammable and chemically reactive liquids. Oh, and some good old-fashioned shrapnel. It would be enough to get Mena's attention and perhaps break down the front door. Lalande dropped the powdered triggering agent, which was wrapped in an old cloth, into the bucket of chemicals and turned tail. Asha was crouched behind one of Mena's older, sturdier cars, and Lalande dove behind it. She grinned sideways at Asha. "Should go off any minute now." Tight-lipped, Asha nodded and handed her an automatic rifle. The woman was doing a good job of seeming calm and composed, but Lalande had watched her long enough to realise that a quiet Asha was a tense or upset one. However, as long as she was still in control, Lalande would follow her orders, because she had also come to realise that Asha was a good, strong and loyal leader, and a person. In fact, if Lalande hadn't been interested in Talon, she'd have already propositioned to Asha, boss or no. A watery pop sounded as the chemical reaction burst the plastic bucket. The liquids and all of her homemade shrapnel flew in several directions, shredding the wooden surface of the front door and embedding shards into the stone wall. At the same time, the chemical reaction reached its flash point, igniting the flammable liquids in a satisfying whoosh of flames that covered the stone walls, stairs, and door. The wooden entrance, having already been shredded by shrapnel, quickly crumpled under the heat of the flames, leaving a gaping, flaming hole at the front of the building. The two women got to their feet behind the old car and aimed their autos at the now burning front of the building. Answering weapons fire came out at them through a window to one side. Next to her, Asha turned slightly and fired at them. Scene break. Nama's jaw tightened. It was very dark at the back of the manor house. The moon, stars, and nearby nebula that would normally be lighting their way were obscured by thick cloud. Nama was lucky to have a fairly good night vision, certainly better than Talon's, but it was still almost pitch black around them. Gunfire came from inside the building. Hearing it and not being able to move made it difficult for Nama to keep still. His finger tapped the trigger guard of his auto. He and Talon were crouched down under the windows next to the back door. Abandoned trash cans had been pushed over onto their sides a long time ago and lay haphazardly around them. Nearby, Talon sighed. I can't get through to Bana. The side suppression is too thick to penetrate on this side. Don't worry, we'll get in there. A boom sounded from the other side of the building. It had to be Asha and Lalan. Without saying anything, they both strode up to the stairs and readied themselves to enter. Nama opened the door that Lalan had previously picked for them and stepped inside with his weapon at the ready. The room beyond was an old kitchen, obviously disused and badly damaged by fire a long time ago. The cracked and blackened wall and floor tiles had once been white or perhaps a pale yellow. A lime green bench top stood against the nearest wall to their right, and a second surface sat in the middle of the room. Inside the left-hand wall was an old iron range oven, the type that everyone used 200 or 300 years ago before electricity. On the opposite corner to them, a man in dark clothes was standing in a doorway with his back to them. Unhooking his second silenced weapon from the holster at his side, Nama lifted it, aimed, and pulled the trigger. The man dropped to the floor. Nama couldn't sense much of anything beyond the room they were in, which meant that even the internal walls must have psi-suppressant material in them. He turned to look behind him. Tay, all beyond is clear. Talon had his hand on the wall, likely sensing out the spaces around them through his PK ability. Room to the right has 3 people in it. Nama smiled at his old friend. Thanks. You ready? Talon lifted his hand from the wall and nodded.